All right, let's dive into the mind of one of history's most complicated and, honestly, most misunderstood thinkers, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Now, he's a philosopher a lot of us think we know, but his ideas are just packed with these incredible contradictions. Was he all about untamed nature, or was he secretly defending society? Let's try and unravel this paradox.
So the popular version of Rousseau, the one you probably heard about in school, is pretty simple. He's the guy who gave us the noble savage. The idea that we're all born naturally good, but that society, with its art, its science, its politics, it just ruins us. It was a totally radical idea, and it's what made him famous.
But, yeah, that's not even close to the whole story. If you only know Rousseau as the guy who thought civilization was a huge mistake, you are missing the most fascinating part of his philosophy. The reality is just so much more complex, and frankly, way more interesting.
To really get the Rousseau paradox, we've got to go back to the beginning. I'm talking about the single moment that launched his entire career, something he described as a total, life-altering epiphany.
It all kicked off in 1749. Rousseau, who at the time was a pretty unknown composer, was walking to visit his friend in prison, and on the way, he sees an ad for an essay contest. The question was a big one. Have the arts and sciences actually made us better people, morally speaking? For Rousseau, the answer hit him like a lightning bolt.
In his own words, he said he saw another universe. The idea that just blew his mind was revolutionary. We aren't born flawed or sinful. We're born good. It is our institutions, our cities, our schools, our governments. They are what make us wicked. He poured all of that into his essay, won first prize, and boom, became an intellectual celebrity overnight.
At the very heart of this natural goodness is a concept he called amour-propre. Now, you can think of this as just a simple, healthy form of self-love. It's that basic instinct to find food when you're hungry or to find shelter when it's cold. It's not about being better than anyone else. It's just the pure, innocent drive to survive that we share with pretty much every other animal. Okay, so far so simple, right? Man is good, society is bad. Got it. But this is Rousseau we're talking about, and this is exactly where he flips the entire script on us, introducing the great central paradox of all his work.
Get this. The very same man who famously tore society to shreds also argued that it is the only thing that makes us truly human. He actually believed that leaving that pure state of nature was absolutely essential for us to become, well, us.
And this table here, it just lays out the great trade-off perfectly. In our natural state, we're guided by pure instinct and whatever we feel like doing at the moment. Our liberty is really just about having the strength to take what we want. But we're also amoral. We don't have a concept of right and wrong. When we enter civil society, we trade that raw instinct for a sense of justice and reason. We give up our individual power for a liberty that's protected by law. We become moral beings. And Rousseau himself says this so powerfully. He writes that anyone who makes this change should forever bless the moment that turned them from a stupid and unimaginative animal into an intelligent being and a man. So there it is. Civilization corrupts us, but it's also the only thing that elevates us. That's the paradox. So, what's the engine of all this corruption? Well, Rousseau points to a second, much more dangerous kind of self-love, amour-propre. Unlike that simple, innocent amour de soi, this kind of love is all about comparison. It's not enough to just exist. We have this burning need to be seen as better than other people. This is where vanity, jealousy, pride, and shame come from. For Rousseau, this is the psychological poison of social life, and it's born the second we start sizing ourselves up against our neighbors. But there's another major problem running through Rousseau's work, one that's pretty much impossible to ignore today. For all his talk about freedom and equality, his grand vision had a massive, and I mean very deliberate, blind spot.
In his famous book on education, Emile, Rousseau is just shockingly direct about this. He claims that women are naturally subordinate, that they were literally created to please and obey men. For him, this wasn't some social problem to be fixed. It was just a law of nature.
And this is where the hypocrisy just becomes glaring, as the philosopher Susan Mahler-Auken pointed out so brilliantly. Rousseau argues that proud and unconquerable men would never just willingly give up their freedom, right? So he has to invent this whole complex social contract to explain why they'd ever agree to join society. But he never even tries to explain why proud and unconquerable women would do the exact same thing. He just assumes their subordination from the get-go.
So, this makes it crystal clear.
When Rousseau was writing these groundbreaking attacks on inequality, he was almost exclusively concerned with inequality between men. His entire framework for human freedom was basically built on the idea that women were subordinate.
So, what do we have? A critic of society who thinks it's the only thing that makes us human, and a theorist of equality whose vision excludes half the population. These contradictions are precisely why Rousseau is still such an explosive and important figure to wrestle with.
And his influence is just undeniable. He inspired the entire Romantic movement's focus on emotion and nature. With his brutally honest book, Confessions, he basically invented the modern autobiography, and he laid the groundwork for modern education and, of course, political philosophy.
Just take his most famous political idea, the general will. Even here, there's a huge tension. Is the general will simply what the majority of people decide when they get together and vote? Or is it some kind of higher, transcendent truth about what's best for everyone? A truth that the people themselves might actually get wrong? This question has been debated for centuries, which just shows you how unsettled his legacy really is.
And that brings us right back to the central dilemma. Rousseau leaves us with a question that, in our world of social media and constant comparison, feels even more urgent than it did in the 18th century. What is real freedom? Is it the wild liberty of our natural instincts, free from anyone else's judgment? Or is it the moral liberty we get by living as citizens under laws we create for ourselves? Rousseau never really gives us a neat answer, and maybe that's the whole point. The question is now ours to figure out.